Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you have to come to the door of the unit there so I can see you. So I know this is working. So this is English. This should be just on the English section. Excellent. Can't really see. I got my wrong glasses on. Do that again. Just want to make sure that's okay. Perfect. Got it. Here's the English one on the second one. Got it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If I could ask members of council to take their seats, we'll start the meeting in 1 minute. On va commencer la réunion dans 1 minute. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ottawa City Council meeting of the 12th of April. Bienvenue au Conseil municipal de la Ville d'Ottawa pour le 12 avril 2017. For those who are able to, could you please rise and stand for a moment of personal reflection and remain standing, and we'll have our colleague, Councillor Cloutier, introduce our guests who are going to perform O Canada. Merci. If you could remain standing, and we'll ask Councillor Cloutier to introduce our very special guests who are going to perform O Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Rideau Park United Church is a wonderful spiritual and community asset that hosts scout groups, community association meetings, Harmony Club meetings. It's also the church where I was married 30 years ago. Handbells have been at Rideau Park since 1972 and represent a vital source of teamwork and music appreciation across the years. The congregation has several active groups of handbell ringers who believe that community outreach through music is a major influence that allows the sharing of talents with others. The group rings bells at many different events and places throughout the year. Churches, senior citizen homes, weddings, the rehab center, the list goes on. In this Holy Week, they are very busy preparing for Easter celebrations, and I appreciate that they've accepted my invitation to be here today. Je suis très fier d'accueillir les membres.
I'm so proud to welcome the member of the Rideau Park Rideau Church for their interpretation of our national anthem.
The Goss, the Rideau Park United Church Handbell Choir.
Well, that was very, very good. Congratulations. Very skilled talent in Rideau Park United Church, and thank you, Councillor Cloutier, for inviting our guests. It's now my pleasure to present this meeting's Mayor City Builder Award. I'd ask Patrick Lynn to come forward, as well as Councillor Michael Kakish, his City Councillor. Come on in here, Patrick. J'aimerais demander Monsieur Lynn ici.
I'd like to ask Mr. Patrick Lynn and his councillor Michael Kakish to join me for the presentation of the Mayor's City Builder Award.
And I know that Patrick has a number of guests who are with us here today, and we welcome them as well. The Mayor's City Builder Award recognizes extraordinary commitment to making our city a better place today and in the future through outstanding volunteerism and exemplary action. I'm honored to present this award to Mr. Patrick Lynn, who is the founder of Rideau Stone Arts Centre and is being recognized for promoting cultural exchanges between the people of China and Canada. This past February, Mr. Lynn organized a concert with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra and Ottawa Symphony Orchestra in celebration of Canada's 150th anniversary. The concert was absolutely spectacular. I had the honor of being there. It was a phenomenal success, further strengthened the ties between Ottawa and our only sister city, Beijing. Patrick and his wife, Yvonne, who is with us here today, are active patrons of the NAC Foundation, and they're proud supporting partners of the NAC Orchestra Canada 150 Tour. Mr. Lynn is also being recognized for his work with the Ottawa Regional Cancer Foundation, Invest Ottawa, and with many programs to attract Chinese investment right here to Ottawa. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Lynn for his many contributions.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Lynn for his many contributions.
On behalf of your City Councillor and all members of Council, to present you with the Mayor's City Builder Award. You've only been living in Ottawa how many years now?
7 years.
7 years, and already he has a remarkable resume of community and philanthropic activities, a great role model for all new Canadians coming to our city. Congratulations and thank you for your good work. Félicitations.
Thank you so much.
Come on out here, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Your Worship, councillors. Actually, I'm very nervous and thrilled. And my family members, my wife and children, never allow me to speak in public because I'm not a good speaker. but I have to say that I'm very, very grateful for this special award that is given to me today. And as a ordinary Ottawa resident and as a Canadian citizen, I'm very honored to accept this award. Actually, we moved to Ottawa 7 years ago. As you know, that we started to work to promote the Ottawa-Beijing relationship, and we feel that Ottawa is such a great city, and it deserves our effort to make our contribution as ordinary residents and citizens. So, well, actually, in Chinese, capital means the best of the best. So we are lucky that we live in Ottawa, the capital city of our nation. And what I'm going to say is we have done something, but compared with this award today, we feel that we are very obliged, and we feel that we are over-awarded. So what we can do is that in the future we will do more to make contribution to the city of Ottawa. And let me finish this. Hi. let me conclude this way, because this is not a flattery. City of Ottawa, Ottawa is a city of peace, order, friendly people, and when we move here, we totally agree with what has been said by the first Prime Minister of Canada when we talk about this today to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Canada. We see that Sir John A. Macdonald said, Canada is a country of peace, order, and good government, and we believe it. Now we have to say that Ottawa is a city of peace, order, good government of councillors, and a great mayor. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you, Patrick, and your colleagues from the Ottawa Symphony, who I know are looking forward to the partnership with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra. April is National Poetry Month, and it's my honor to introduce Ottawa's two newly appointed poet laureates. I'd ask that Madame André Lassalle and Mr. Jamel Jackson Rogers join me here for a presentation. J'aimerais demander
I'd like to ask Ms. André Lasselle and Mr. Jamal Jackson Rogers to join me for the presentation of the proclamation.
Your city councillors, Councillor Fleury and Councillor Eli El Shantiri, to come forward as well. Welcome, bienvenue. Et voici Mathieu et conseiller El Shantiri. I'm very pleased to welcome representatives from Verse Ottawa and city staff responsible for the city's new Poet Laureate program, including the Cultural Development and Initiatives team who are with us here today. The Ottawa Poet Laureate program is administered by Verse Ottawa on behalf of the City of Ottawa. The working group was composed of individual poets, representatives from Verse Ottawa, the Ottawa International Writers Festival, Carleton University, and the Ottawa Public Library. This is a significant cultural and educational initiative, and the renewed Poet Laureate program will support programs and events that promote poetry. Ottawa's Poet Laureates will act as ambassadors of poetry here in Ottawa and anywhere they are asked to speak. À ce titre, effort de leur écrit,
Ottawa Poets Laureate will act as ambassadors of poetry here in Ottawa and anywhere they are asked to speak.
Should mention, for the first time in our city's history, we have both an English and a Francophone Poet Laureate. Before, it was simply just an English Poet Laureate, I believe. Literature and poetry inspire and unite and help us reach out to the community and beyond. As Canada celebrates its 150th birthday, National Poetry Month takes on greater significance, providing a unique opportunity to acknowledge the past as we plan and look forward to what will come next. I'd like to thank the poets and writers who teach and inspire us, help us bring meaning to our experiences and our words to our emotions. I also want to acknowledge the groups and organizations that foster this creativity, including the League of Canadian Poets, the members of Verse Ottawa, our Poet Laureates, and the members of the poetry community in Ottawa. Our own Poet Laureates will each recite a poem following the presentation of the proclamation. And now, if I could have the proclamation. I think we only have one, so you'll have to share it. Oh, you got ones too, okay. Copies. There we have copies. So I'm just going to present this to officially proclaim April 2017 as National Poetry Month in the City of Ottawa. Mois national de la poésie, avril 2017 dans la ville d'Ottawa. Félicitations. Madame Lasselle will recite her poem Nos eaux vives, nos âmes. Voilà, Madame.
Bon, je suis évidemment impressionnée de me trouver ici, pour une première fois d'ailleurs, et aussi pour, pour cette magnifique annonce du mois de la poésie ici à Ottawa. Et je voudrais exprimer, bien sûr, je l'ai fait le 26 mars, mais je veux le refaire devant vous tous et toutes, combien je suis honorée d'avoir été nommée.
And to say how honored I am to have been appointed Poet Laureate. This is an official Francophone presence in Ottawa, capital of Canada, our city. This poem is an open space where so many things are said and created, and the city of Ottawa is one of welcoming and openness. And it is reaching out thanks to the political complicity. And now, a poem that I will introduce with these words from the poet Robert Frost.
Your waters and your watering place, drink and be all again, beyond confusion. Nos eaux vives, nos âmes. Quand j'étais enfant, Quand j'étais enfant, la rivière, c'était chez moi. Horizon, plage, nos pas, nos âmes, nos visages. Rivière, rideau, rivière des Outaouais, rapide, source, ruisseau, nos eaux vives. Poésie enracinée, poésie migrante, une histoire jamais la même, des mémoires parallèles se croisent. Vivre en un lieu, mourir à un espace, le redécouvrir avec d'autres, se penser à neuf, se refaire, se redire, dire. Ensouchés ici ou venus d'ailleurs, sommes tous en quête d'un chez-soi. Dans nos départs, nos arrivées, toujours nous déplaçant vers une autre intensité. Dans l'enceinte d'une ville ouverte, vibre de vastes constructions, le cœur au présent, le centre devant, le trait, le cercle, l'alliance, femme, homme, nos souffles, une signature. Avant-coureuse, la parole, gîte dans nos mots sans calcul. Et la poésie, cette grande rapailleuse, partout nous reçoit. Merci et belle journée à vous tous.
Thank you and have a nice day.
All right, good morning. I'd just like to start out by saying that it's a great privilege and honor to be given this opportunity to stand as an ambassador for poetry. My name is Jamal Jackson Rogers, and I'd like to also thank Verse Ottawa, the City Council and City of Ottawa, and all the people involved with bringing the Poet Laureate position back into our city, and I hope that I can do it justice and represent it with the standards that poets in the city have carried this great profession, and also for the past Poet Laureates 27 years ago and more. I have a poem called Dedication that I'd like to perform today, and it's about looking at the word poem or poetry as a metaphor for rising up and triumph. I'd also like to give thanks to my ancestors. My great-grandfather Albert Jackson is known as Canada's first black postman, and he used his voice to have his position honored by the first Prime Minister of Canada. And so from that strength, I'd like to recite this poem. What does it mean to write a poem and be truly dedicated to it? To script its destiny into fulfillment like an infant born with infinite possibilities. To rip its pages from its spinal journal. Fold the edges like wings. Raise it to the throne of heaven's feet and serve it to the sea to set it free. To gift it back to the oblivion from whence it came. To learn from its creation and allow its existence to spark revolutions like when civilizations accept new definitions of love in their laws and lexicons. But what does it mean to know that every poem has a purpose and every person is a poem? To remember that you were born with the same intention that first burst the sun into our galaxy. To be someone's light that never diminishes. A source of warmth and comfort for so long that it would feel like eons. But what does it mean to write your lonely into discovery until the ink of the pen runs dry? Until the voice of the poet forges into an unforgettable crescendo. Until all things past and future filter into the covenant of time to remind us that the present is truly our present. And if there were only 3 minutes left to finish this poem, or less, what does it mean to fear that in those 180 seconds you will have nothing left good to say to those who need to hear it the most? including yourselves. What does it mean to let the tears fall hard from your eyes like angry rain from the sky because for what seems like centuries you have kept so much pain inside? To ignore the work, the phone, the door, all so you can let this poem pour out of your soul the way it has been scratching at the surface of your core, digging at the space you consider to be your last hope, your source, a dark place only because you have kept this poem tucked away for days like never before, days until now when the concave glass keeper cracks at its cylinder sides, giving way to cascading glass like shards, riding tides, remnants of a poem balancing on the triumph of your smile because for the first time, you have learned to tame the tidal waves of the unknown. For the metaphor of life is to rip through ripples of doubt until you have learned to master your board, your wood, your pen, your pencil, your paper, your purpose, your person, your poem, until you finally stand tall like the willow trees we sit beneath to write out our story with a foreword that reads, dedicated to me. May I always seek to be clean, pure, and free. And may these words fill me until I fear no more, until I doubt no more, until I am sure that I am the greatest line in the most beautiful poem ever heard. Thank you very much.
Those are hard acts to follow. Congratulations, and thank you very, very much. I'd like to take a few moments to update members of council on LeBreton Flats. J'aimerais tout d'abord profiter de...
I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the National Capital Commission for all their efforts in on this issue.
Request of the National Capital Commission, the City of Ottawa entered into commercially confidential and exploratory discussions with Rendezvous LeBreton Group, also known as RLG. The goal was to determine how the City of Ottawa could participate in the process for the LeBreton Flats redevelopment. As you're all aware, on November 24, 2016, the NCC formally designated RLG as the preferred proponent for the redevelopment of LeBreton Flats. Today, I'm pleased to announce that I will be seeking a mandate from Committee and Council to allow the City of Ottawa to enter into formal negotiations with RLG, the NCC, and other government partners on the redevelopment of LeBreton Flats. Je suis fier d'annoncer.
I'm proud to announce that I will be asking City Council to give us a mandate to negotiate with Rendezvous Le Breton, the NCC, and other partners for the redevelopment of the flats.
An increased level of engagement with RLG over the course of the next year, and I feel it's important to get a clear mandate from the public and from Council on the path forward for this project. As you're all aware, I've asked staff to prepare a report for consideration by the Finance and Economic Development Committee between now and the fall to outline Council's vision and mandate for future negotiations on this important and transformational project. LeBreton has the potential to be a tremendous city and community building opportunity. The city needs to be at the table for these discussions. La ville d'Ottawa doit être...
The city must be present at the table for this discussion.
I'm asking that Committee and Council give the City Manager and I a formal mandate to negotiate on behalf of the City of Ottawa. I look forward to hearing from members of Council and from public delegations on the scope of that mandate later this year. I feel it's important to speak publicly about how the City should support the redevelopment of LeBreton Flats. For example, all the partners need to agree on how the public realm improvements will be delivered and who has ongoing responsibility for operations and maintenance. We need to know how the arena will be financed, delivered and maintained, and of course how the remediation of the site will be completed and financed. As part of the report, I'm also very mindful of the potential economic loss to Stittsville, Canada, and the West End of our city should the Canadian Tire Centre be closed. I will work with the Ottawa Senators Organization, West End councillors, businesses, and residents to ensure that appropriate options are being developed to help make up for the loss of the arena. These are just a few of the issues for which I have asked staff to recommend a negotiating mandate. Ce sont quelques enjeux pour lesquels
Those are only a few issues that I've asked the staff to propose for the next step in this project.
Size and complexity requires a strong team with a mutually defined set of goals and clear lines of accountability. We need to know who is responsible for each aspect of this complex project. This report is the first step in defining what the city's role will be in moving the project forward. I'd like to take a moment to go over some of these reasons why I believe this project is so important to our city and its future. Not only does this redevelopment support the city's intensification and community building policies, it also promotes connectivity with the city's pedestrian, cycling, and multi-use pathways. Le Breton will connect the downtown core and Centertown, Chinatown, Hintonburg, Wellington West, and the Innovation Centre at Bayview Yards, as well as Little Italy. It will also improve access to the historic Ottawa River shoreline in ways not seen in literally decades. Le Breton Flats will support transit-oriented development along the Confederation Line and Stage 2 LRT, increasing the long-term viability of our LRT investments and bolstering transit usage across the city. Bordered by the new Central Library and the Innovation Centre at Bayview Yards, Pimisi and Bayview stations will become attractive hubs for entertainment, innovation, and access to the Ottawa River. Le Breton is also another opportunity for us to strengthen transit, economic, and tourism ties with the city of Gatineau. Ce développement augmentera la viabilité de nos investissements dans le train léger, de même que l'usage.
This will improve the use of the transit train in the city.
We'll also see fewer people driving to major events at the arena. I'd like to provide one practical example of what Le Breton means for our city. In 2015, events at the Canadian Tire Centre attracted over 2 million individual visits. About 50,000 people traveled to the CTC by OC Transpo. If a major event centre were relocated to Le Breton, it is estimated that over 80% of people would use public transit or active transportation to get to the event. That means over 1.5 million people previously using their cars, clogging up our roads, and frankly wasting precious time would be using OC Transpo. This is a stunning example of how beneficial the redevelopment of Lansdowne could be for our city, for our residents, and for the environment and the economy. Just take a second to consider how much easier it's going to be to get to a game or a major event from anywhere in the city, from a hotel located in Orleans, from downtown or the airport, or from our world-class post-secondary institutions. Think of the student who is studying sports management, for instance, at Algonquin and has an internship at the Canadian Tire Centre. Once Phase 2 of LRT is completed, that student can come directly from the Algonquin campus in Nepean all the way to the new centre at Le Breton. And it's an example of smart growth because, as we all know, over 70% of Ottawa residents, thanks to Stage 2 LRT expansion, will be within 5 kilometres of an LRT station to facilitate access to their new centre at Le Breton. With park and ride options along LRT and the transitway, we believe that car traffic to and from the venue will decrease significantly, as we've witnessed at Lansdowne Park. I believe that Le Breton is destined to become a new and exciting economic hub, one that will foster the City of Ottawa's long-range economic prosperity, provide housing, including affordable housing, and jobs for people in our city. Ce développement des plaines rebêtantes.
This development includes the short-term and long-term economic growth of Ottawa.
Transparent about the nature of these negotiations and to outline how a project of this magnitude will require staff time, resources, and focus for our city staff. C'est pourquoi nous avons besoin d'un mandat clair.
This is why we need a clear mandate from City Council.
Scope. We all have to be in this together, and we all have to share this collective commitment to making Le Breton a place where residents and visitors will live, work, and play. This important piece of land has remained underused for close to 5 decades, and it's time to give new life to this part of our city. In summary, in recent years, the unprecedented level of cooperation between the City of Ottawa, the Province of Ontario, the Government of Canada, and the private sector has led to groundbreaking developments that are now serving as transformational investments for our future. This includes the Confederation Line, Stage 2 LRT, the Innovation Centre, the new Ottawa Art Gallery, the Arts Court, Lansdowne Park, and the Ottawa River Action Plan. I believe that Le Breton could be the next project that can inspire our city-building efforts. The City of Ottawa is committed to continuing to work closely with our partners on this exciting development and strategic transportation hub. Today, I'm launching the process for engaging with the public and council on this city-building opportunity. And as I said, I will be bringing forward a report to FEDCO and then council in the months ahead that will outline a strategy. And in the interim, I very much look forward to meeting with members of council individually and hearing from the public on their vision for Le Breton Flats. Merci. Roll call, please.
Conseiller Monette.
Present.
Councillor Middick.
Here.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Present.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Kadri.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Conseiller Fleury.
Ici.
Councillor Nussbaum.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Chernyshenko.
Present.
Conseiller Cloutier.
Present.
Conseiller Blais.
Here.
Councillor DeRose.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Kakish.
Present.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Ici.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Merci. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès verbaux, le 8 mars 2017, March 8th minutes 2017. Carried. Declaration of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. None. Communications as presented. No regrets filed to date. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Conseiller Monette, appuyé par Conseiller Kadri, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Présenté par moi-même, appuyé.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kadri, that the Ottawa Board of Health Report 9, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 23, Community and Protective Services Committee Report 22, Finance and Economic Development Committee Reports 22A and 23, Planning Committee Report 41, Transportation Committee Report 22, and the report from the City Clerk and Solicitor's Office entitled A Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for Items Subject to Bill 73, Explanation Requirements, at the City Council meeting of March 8, 2017, be received and considered.
On the motion, carried. Adopté. Ottawa Board of Health, report number 9, rapport numéro 9 du Conseil de santé d'Ottawa. Received. Committee reports, thank you, Councillor Kadri. I know Dr. Levy is here as well. Thank you. Committee reports, rapport du Comité Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, report number 23, rapport numéro 23 du Comité de l'Agriculture et des Affaires Rurales, all-way stop control at intersection of Osgood, Main and Elizabeth Street. Carried. Item 3, disposition of 2016 tax and rate-supported operating surplus deficit. Carried. 2017 City of Ottawa Municipal Accessibility Plan Update Report. Received. Appointments to the Canada Central Business Improvement Area Board of Management. Nomination au Conseil de gestion de la zone d'amélioration de commerciale centrale de Canada. As amended. Carried. Item 6, 2017 tax ratios and other tax policies. We have a motion from Councillor El Shantiri and Taylor, and then Councillor Nussbaum. Do you have a motion or would you like to speak to this? Okay, so we'll come back to item 6 then. Item 7 is revitalization of Byward and Parkdale markets, new management model and governance structure. Carried. Thank you to all who worked on that. Planning Committee report number 41, rapport numéro 41 du Comité de l'urbanisme, Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendment 1309 Carling Avenue. Carried. Item number 9, Bylaw Amendment 1960 Scott Street. I believe Councillor Leeper would like to speak to this one, so we'll come back to that. Item 10, Zoning Bylaw Amendment 1400 Carling Avenue, Modification au Règlement de Zonage 1400 Avenue Carling. Carried. Dissents by Brockington and Leeper. Item 11, Zoning Bylaw Amendment 1435 Randall Avenue, Modification de Règlement de Zonage 1435 Avenue Randall. This is the famous water tower. I'm very pleased the land is sold. We fast-tracked it. It was 17 years. Congratulations to us all. Zoning Bylaw Amendment 47 Havelock Street, Modification au Règlement de Zonage 47 Rue Havelock. Carried. Item number 13, Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendment 102 Bill Leatham Drive. I know Councillor Harder and Deans. Do people have comments on this? So we're going to hold this. Item 14, Zoning Bylaw Amendment to permit Farmers Market and Village Square Park, Byron Linear, Tramway Park, and the Riverview Park and Ride. Councillor Fleury and Harder have a technical motion. Does anyone else wish to speak to the 3 new park or farmers markets? So, Councillor Fleury, if you'd like to introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas St. Charles Church Farmers Market located at 135 Barrette Street will be displaced as a result of the redevelopment of the St. Charles Church lands located at the corner of Barrette and Beechwood Avenue, and whereas a temporary location is needed for the farmers market until the return to 135 Barrette Street following completion of the redevelopment of St. Charles Church lands, and whereas Optimus Park, 43 Sainte Cécile, is suitable location for a farmers market that is near the current location of the farmers and of the market, and whereas Optimus Park is zone 01 open space zone and a farmers market is not permitted use in that zone, therefore be resolved that staff be directed to initiate a temporary rezoning to permit a farmers market at Optimus Park for a period up to 3 years.
So I just had a couple of questions. This is on a residential street. We just put money into Optimus Park, if I'm not mistaken. Is there any concern by the neighbors, by parking on the street, by tearing up the park, since we just put money into it?
We've met with Mr. Chenier's team members, Kevin Weary, and the operators. It is temporary, and they will use a big section of Marquette Street. As you know, this year we are doing Sainte Cécile Street in Vanier. We're seeing construction, and the majority of their work will be in the farmers' will be in the asphalted rink. So we're working through the location. It's still early, but it's important for them to find a temporary location.
But have the people on the street been notified that they're about to welcome a farmer's market?
The operator has done some consultation, but we can request more, certainly.
Okay, you might want to just give a heads up. Okay, on the motion, carried. On the report as amended, carried. Next is Transportation Committee Report number 22, rapport numéro 22 du Comité des Transports, Kitchissippi Parking Strategy, Stratégie de stationnement de Kitchissippi. Carried. Item 16, on-street parking regulation change policy, politique de modification de règlement du stationnement sur rue. Carried. Item 17, policy for posting a 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit on an existing roadway. I believe Councillor Eglai and Nussbaum have been working on a motion. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Should we come back to it, or can Councillor Eglai?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask for clarification of the motion.
So we'll hold it. We'll come back to that. Thank you. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda? No. On the bulk consent agenda as presented? Carried. Okay. So we'll go back to the first item that was held for people following in the audience or online or on Rogers. The item is item 6, 2017 tax ratios and other tax policies. So first we have a motion by Councillor El-Shantiri and Councillor Taylor. This is as a result of new information that's come from the province, I believe, just in the last day or two. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Taylor. And as you indicated, Mr. Mayor, this is the latest from
the Minister of Finance sent to us on April 5th, 2017. So there be resolved the City Council approve a landfill ratio of the subject to final minor provincial revision as described in the report, based on the update provided by the Minister of Finance on April 5th, 2017, and that the City Treasurer or designate be delegated the authority to make the necessary adjustment in accordance with this motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nussbaum, I believe, had a question.
Thank you, Jerry. Just a quick question to staff. Looking through the report, I note that staff are recommending adoption of optional tax classes in the commercial broad class, which I understand. I was just trying to get a clearer picture of what the policy rationale is for the various tax rates within the enumerated class. So, for example, office building being taxed at a slightly higher rate than commercial buildings, parking lots and vacant land being taxed at more like half the rate of the office building. I'm just wondering if there's a specific policy rationale for why there are different tax rates within the enumerated specific class categories.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. The adoption of all of the optional tax classes was decided when they came out with it in 1998. So we have been following the past practice ever since. At this point in time, if we were to collapse the classes together, what you would see is a shifting within the class. So you would see taxes coming off of the office tower and moving on to the retail and to the parking lot. So at this point in time, it's too dramatic a shift to make, so we've continued with the past practice of having all of the optional classes.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, I have no problem with that. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm just trying to understand a little bit of what the rationale is for the different tax rates within those specific classes. So, for example, why vacant lands and parking lots would be taxed half of what an office building is, for example.
The answer to that is basically it's historical. When we moved to current value assessment in 1998, the province established ratios for all of the classes and the subclasses, which was meant to mimic the same tax burden as they had in 1997. So it's an historical allocation between those various properties that we have basically not really tampered with since that time. So the tax burden has remained the same.
Would there be value for future years examining those specific classes to see whether or not the tax rates are achieving our other broader policy objectives and reviewing that in light of what's happened in the intervening 20 years?
We can look at those again. As I said before, when we've looked at this in past years, I remember looking at the parking lot category, and the question was, why is that at half? Why isn't that a higher rate? And it just ended up being shifting among the class, which Council was not interested in doing so, because it won't shift taxes off of residential. It just basically moves it around in that bucket. So, but we can have a look at that and have a discussion with you about the various changes and the impact on the city on overall taxation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thanks, Councillor Nussbaum. So on Councillor El-Shantiri and Taylor's motion, carried. On the report as amended, carried. The next item that was held is item number 9, zoning bylaw amendment 1960 Scott Street, modification au règlement de zonage 1960 Rue Scott. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On 1960 Scott, I do want to make one final appeal to my colleagues on council to reject this application. The zoning for the area contemplated in the secondary plan is 6 stories, and approving this building at 22 is a very large leap in what the secondary planning allows. I think if we approve this today, we're going to be setting a new planning context for really the entire area that runs
runs from Scott to Byron, from Island Park to Churchill, without having had an honest and transparent discussion about residents about how their neighborhood is likely to change. In advance of a new secondary plan that reflects the new reality of an LRT station at Dominion, an LRT station at Westboro, I think it's premature to start approving these kinds of heights. Council, if you are able to find your way to support me in rejecting this application, I think we're going to be helping to protect the investment that residents have made in their homes, the investment that residents have made in their community, and so that we can establish that there is some certainty to the secondary plans that the city sets out. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So on the report, carried. Dissents by Chernyshenko, Riley, Brockington, Leeper, McKenney, Nussbaum, and Fleury. And Deans. Okay. Item number 10, zoning bylaw amendment 1400. Oops, sorry, we've done that one. Official plan and zoning bylaw amendment 102 Bill Leatham Drive. Councillor Harder and Councillor Deans have a motion. Councillor Harder, if you'd like to introduce it, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Deans and myself for a long time actually have been concerned that our current zoning and what is allowed in industrial areas, employment areas, has not been reviewed or renewed in far too long. And myself personally, I can tell you that, and Councillor Deans says the same thing, we have many large, what you'd call religious organizations that have raised money over 10, 15 years, and they have finally built their place. To call it a place of worship is to trivialize the work that they do in those places. For example, the Cedarview Alliance Church. It expanded, it doubled the size. There is a service there a couple of times a week. The rest of the time it's used for a lot of good work in the community. It's a place of assembly. Our new synagogue that we have in Barrhaven, recently MPP McLeod held a day of humanity at that, and people from all over came together. They assembled there. Yes, at religious times they have their religious service. Our mosque that Councillor Kakish and I have on Woodruff Avenue, for years they raised the money. Are they in the best place that's appropriate? I don't know, but to restrict them from places across the city I think is wrong. And so I would think and hope that all of you will support this refreshing, if you will, of the wording for places of assembly, places of worship, and beyond that. And at this time we want to keep it quite open because we're not quite sure of what may come up that we want to also expand into across the city. It truly is across the city, and it's not confined to any specific place. But it just is about to box places of worship into a traditional Roman Catholic church, United Church, or any of the ones that we see in the older parts of our town is not realistic. And in fact, those places, because they are too confined to that, are suffering immensely and are having to close. So this is about recognizing, for example, that the EY Center, which is, as you know, on the doorstep of the Ottawa International Airport, and likely will be asking for an expansion, is home to the two largest Muslim celebrations annually. Okay, so that 10,000 Muslims go there because there's no other greater place, and truly that is a religious moment. So it's time for us to have this discussion, and we're hoping that you'll support us today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. And so we have the motion, I believe it's on the screen, by Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor Deans, and Councillor Cloutier has the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Merci, and thank you, Chair Harder. Generally, I support the motion. I think a refresh of the place of institutional uses and employment lands the city are good. I'm a little bit concerned that this motion has been presented in the context of the planning report that we are considering this morning, and specifically 102 Leatham. In this case, the Salvation Army has asked for permission to build in the airport operations inclusion zone, which is an area that has been designated as a protected zone that should be protected from noise-sensitive uses, such as, and I recognize the Salvation Army and some places of worship have worship in certain ways, and other denominations, the Roman Catholic Church, worship in other ways. Not all are the same. So to throw everything in the same basket, I think, is a little will cause some problems. But back to the economic impact of what the Airport Operations Inclusion Zone is trying to attain is to protect the airport from future restrictions. Historically, Transport Canada has imposed restrictions on night flights. We've seen this in Toronto due to increased noise complaints, and as I've said, we've seen this in both Toronto and Montreal. And that's the point. Since you brought this motion, Chair Harder and Councillor Deans, in the context of 102 Leatham, I'm wondering why it was brought at this point of our deliberations, because at the point that I had made at Planning Committee was to protect the importance of the Airport Operations Inclusion Zone. And so, Councillor Harder and Councillor Deans, I was wondering if you would accept a friendly amendment to your motion that would be included in the therefore, that would say, therefore be it resolved that planning services undertake a study relating to select institutional uses in employment area, and I would add at this point, excluding employment lands within the Airport Operations Inclusion Zone. That is the only change that that I would ask, because, as I've said at planning, I think the International Airport Authority has a responsibility to certainly, absolutely, it's without question, impacts the economic development of our city, contributing $4 billion, employment for thousands and thousands of people, and we don't want to endanger that. So my question is, would you accept that friendly amendment?
So, Councillor Harder.
Councillor Deans to speak for both of us, because we both will not accept it. Councillor Deans?
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks, Councillor Cloutier. The reason that Councillor Harder and I are not going to accept that as a friendly amendment is that we're asking for a study. We're looking at a review. We want to look at all of the institutional zones across the city, and we don't want to limit it at the outset. So it's not to say that there will be any impact on any land surrounding the airport. It's just to say we don't want to confine it at the very beginning of the study. And the reason we're putting this motion is because the way people assemble and the way people are gathering in our city is changing. It's changing rather dramatically. And in some of the suburban communities, we're really seeing that. And we feel that the time has come that we update our policies to be more reflective and to make sure that we are doing the best we can in terms of accommodating new uses and ways that people assemble in our city. So we don't want to limit this at the outset, and for that reason we do not see the amendment as friendly.
Okay, so Councillor, you've heard the response. You can move it as your own amendment if you have a seconder.
May I ask the city solicitor a question?
Yep, go ahead.
Mr. O'Connor, that this is presented at this time and in the context of 102 Leatham. What is the impact on the airport operations inclusion zone, and specifically not the motion in of itself, but the fact that it's presented as an item of 102 Leatham?
I think Mr. Mark will answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would have no immediate impact because, as Councillor Deans just said, it is a study. However, I would have to say that if this matter goes to a hearing, I think based upon comments that I've already heard from the Airport Authority, they would raise the possibility of this type of use, expanding it in the airport inclusion area as a possible concern for the future. So I am certain it will come up in the hearing.
Councillor, anything else? No. So can I just, before we ask Councillor El-Shantiri, ask Ms. Sneddon her comment on the proposal by Councillor Cloutier to exclude the airport area, what staff's position is on that?
Mr. Mayor, at this point in time, I believe staff's opinion would be that we would be open to reviewing right from the outset all areas and zones and not to exclude anything at this point in time. And throughout the process, we'll determine what criteria would be appropriate in what areas.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Cloutier, are you moving that motion? Do you have a seconder?
Thank you.
Okay. So, Councillor El-Shantiri, please, has the floor.
My question actually to the treasurer, if it's possible. I don't know where she is. Oh, okay. In the past, religious worship place, they were exempt from development charge. Now, if you go, is that study going to include what does it mean? Will they still be exempt from the development charge at the religious or worship place, or is going to be treated like any other hall or any other facilities? Because really, I need to understand this before I vote on this.
So currently, places of worship are exempt from development charges except for the transit piece. They have to pay the transit. So the decision about whether that exemption should continue or it should be changed is actually part of looking at the development charges. I do not believe it is part of what they are looking at and in this study, and Ms. Sneddon has confirmed that. So it wouldn't be considered as part of this study.
So that means, so if a place is going to be for both religious gather and assembly, that means they will have to be paying development charge like anybody else. Would that?
They would pay development charges on the place of assembly, which would be a hall, which they currently do. It would only be what would be considered the place of worship that would be pay the transit development charge. If they're the same space, then I believe we require them to pay the development charge.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We certainly had a good conversation at committee and got a lot of issues out in the air, and I raised some concerns myself with what the impact would be, not just in the immediate term, but long term going forward for the airport. No one disputes that the Salvation Army does good work in our community and have done so for many, many years, and no one disputes that they need a new location, and no one disputes that Barrhaven has limited choices for land of the size that they need, and even that this is not the first choice. However, I do want to bring members of council's attention to the exact motion. There are some clauses here that I strongly support. 2B talks about a noise study. That should happen. I'll support that. 2B talks about prohibitions, additional list. I support that. And 2D talks about a covenant on title when it's built to talk about the zone that they're in. I support that. I do have some concerns with 2A. Members of council received a letter this week from the CEO of the Ottawa Airport Authority. Mr. LaRoche's letter talks about why this proposal or application should be refused. There are three main reasons from his letter. One, that there are multiple government directives and applicable planning policies that are expressly intended to prohibit noise-sensitive land uses within the airport operations inclusion zones. 2, safeguarding the public's economic interest by protecting the long-term continuous and successful operation of the airport. And 3rd, preventing adverse effects of aircraft noise on the public well-being, which I think are 3 strong arguments that we need to take in consideration. Also from his letter, he talked about city staff consulting with the Ministry of the Environment for advice, and in a letter from the MOE in January, quote, "We agreed that the House of Worship exemption was intended to address an increasingly common conflict with industries, and that there was no intention of applying the exemption to the matter of airplane noise," unquote. Again, since the proposed development is to contain institutional uses such as place of worship, the definition provided by the NPC 300 indicates that this is a noise-sensitive land use and is not permitted under the Ministry of Environment guidelines. Mr. LaRoche quotes the city's own official plan. Section 4.86I states that within the AOIZ, residential and noise-sensitive development is not permitted. Noise-sensitive land uses are considered to be housing, institutional uses, and public facilities. Specific examples of noise-sensitive uses included places of worship. So by permitting an exemption to the established policies that are already in place, the Ministry of the Environmental Noise Guidelines, as well as the city's own official plan, would be detrimental to the economic contribution of the Ottawa International Airport should noise or other airport-related issues impacting this proposed development lead to operational sanctions. So the fear is real. This is not about one particular case. This is about what will permitting development in the AOIZ lead to going forward. And if you look at sanctions in place now, even within our own country, at Montreal Trudeau or Pearson, that because of concerns about noise and aircraft use, it does limit the airport's ability to expand going forward. So again, it's hard to look 20, 30, 40 years from now and what the impacts will be on the airport. But the concern is if you allow one, then there will be other cases that we will have to consider as well, and when do you say no? It's difficult when you have an entity like the Salvation Army, which does such great work and contributes so much to our community, and that there is certainly a strong level of support to see them expand. I want them to expand as well. But the question is whether this is an appropriate area for them to do so. And by permitting it, what will the impacts be on the airport going forward? And I think that's the very real question that we have to wrestle with. On its own, we might say, well, we can permit this. It's a great use. It provides great services to our community. But again, what is the long-term impact, and what could the long-term impact be? We all agree, Mr. Mayor, that the airport is an economic engine of our community. It's a significant employer, and we want it to continue to flourish and function. But I do have concerns about this application and permitting this forward. So I will listen to the debate. I see there are additional speakers, but I do have concerns with 2A. And Mr. Mayor, through you, I'll just ask if we can, like I said, I have no trouble voting for the majority of what's before us today, but I'd like to tease out 2A and vote on that separately if we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do that. Thank you. Merci. Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question to staff, going back to the friendly amendment, which was not adopted. I'm assuming that this study that you're going to go forward with, Ms. Snedden, that the airport will be a stakeholder in that study. They'll have an opportunity to provide their concerns, their questions, and you're not going to do anything except do a report and then come back to us and make recommendation. And again, at that time, if the airport still has concerns, they have that opportunity as well to make their case, raise their concerns with committee and council as a whole.
Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make is they're not out of the process. They're very much going to be in the process and have an opportunity going forward, correct?
That is correct. They will be one of the stakeholders at the table as part of our consultation for that study.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kakish is going to respond to most of the questions and do wrap up. But I did want to point out at committee, I think most of us were surprised by one of the delegation's reports that they brought forward, the aviation land use in the vicinity of aerodromes from Transport Canada, Part 4 airport noise. And there's an excerpt from the tables that speaks to greater than 40, most noise, and that includes commercial office, public, churches are not allowed there, community centers are not allowed there, residential is not allowed there. And then there's a 40 to 35 bracket, and then there's a 35 to 30 bracket and a less than 30 bracket. The fact is that churches are actually in this table, was remarkable to, I think, most people around the table, around the planning table, but in the 35 to 30, NEP contour within the 35 to 30 range, and in the less than 30, in both those cases, churches were allowed. So I just wanted to point that out because Councillor Brockington brought it up.
Great.
Thank you.
Good information to have. Thank you. Councillor Kakish, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just for the context for some of the folks who weren't at Planning Committee as well, in the South Maryville Business Park, just meters away from the site is the RCMP as well, and so we have thousands of employees that are exposed to this flight path on a daily basis that work there 5 days a week, 35 hours a week that are under this flight path. I appreciate and understand as well the importance of the economic viability of the airport and where they're coming from, and I don't think anybody here is prepared to defend any sort of sanctions on the airport in the future. So I want to be crystal clear about that. I don't think anybody here is interested in any curfews or any kind of sanctions on the airport. And as a councillor for the area, I am in a tough situation because I do want to support the Army, but I also Salvation Army, but I also understand where the airport authority is coming from. Councillor Harder yesterday asked that based on the discussions that happened at Planning Committee that the airport follow up on some of the complaints, and I think most of you should have seen the chart over here, and if you see that chart, it shows how Ottawa is actually the lowest number of complaints for the airport relative to Winnipeg, Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto. And if you look at page 3 of that report from the Ottawa Airport, you see that the largest source of aircraft noise complaints is from north of the airport in response to the flying schools following Transport Canada's prescribed circuit. So that's actually from your area, Councillor Brockington, where most of the complaints are coming from. And so what's happened is as the airport has developed over the years, you have all the new development that's coming closer and closer to the airport. But this is quite a few kilometers away in the South Maryville Business Park where I think we have clarity from the applicant that they know what they're getting into. I've offered, and we've had discussions in a meeting yesterday with both parties and Plan and Legal to see if there's any interest in getting something in writing as a motion at this meeting so that as a commitment in terms of not lodging any complaints down the future, but obviously there wasn't any interest in moving down that path. The second issue that I'll say with regards to the economic impact, and that's also on page 3, is the concerns with nighttime sanctions being imposed. The Salvation Army, obviously, as we know, will not be using that facility at night, so there won't be any complaints in that regard. And the Salvation Army, I think, has been clear at Planning Committee that they don't intend to be lodging complaints in the future. And as I said, we've offered to put something in writing to that effect, but there was no interest in going down that path. So all in all, I think, I know this is not the ideal parcel of land to be putting in the Salvation Army location, but I think they've also been searching for parcels for the past, few years and 10 years. And this is where they've settled. They put a lot of energy and resource on it. I think whatever future applications come down the road, we have to take them on as a case-by-case basis. And so for that reason, with all the factors that are before us here, I'm going to be supporting the Salvation Army going in at this location. I'll be supporting Councillor Harder's Councillor Harder's motion amendment to the report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moffat, please.
Thanks. Just a quick question on the on what's permitted inside this zone of influence. So I don't know who to, but just for clarification, you can build a hotel inside this zone, you can build a community center inside this zone, and you can build a convention center inside this zone, correct?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct. It's just the noise-sensitive uses and the types that would be considered noise-sensitive that would not be included in the zone.
Okay, so why is a church different than a community center or a convention center? Like, I can go to Comic-Con, and apparently that's okay. I'm not bothered by the noise, but God forbid I go to church because the noise is going to impact me severely. I'm just curious as to why. I mean, I guess this is just evidence for why you need to review this zone of influence, because to me these seems like pretty equal uses. That's more of a rhetorical question, I guess. Anyways, that's all. I just want to confirm that those things are, because to me those all fit in the same boat. So to suggest that one is okay, I can take my kid to play ball and watch that happen in the zone of influence, but I can't take my kid to church there.
Okay. Just a follow-up on something Councillor Kakish asked Ms. Sneddon with respect to, or maybe it's more Mr. O'Connor or Mr. Mark, item number 2D, that an appropriate covenant be placed on title reflecting the fact that the properties in question is within the Ottawa Airport operating influence zone. You know, how many times have we used as an example when we're out at a community meeting and someone's complaining about a store that's, you know, moved in, and we say, well, look at, you know, you live next to an airport, you've got to get used to the noise. I want to make sure that it's crystal clear that we're not going to have a situation where the church, and we all know they do good work, but comes back and says, listen, we really need a period of silence, you know, in the next 2 days there's a funeral or memorial service and so on, so that the covenant is more than simply window dressing. It actually has some teeth in it, that, you know, they admit that they're not going to be able to go and start rerouting 747. So how do we make that stronger so that it is crystal clear that they're building a church and a community hall on land that may in fact cause some noise challenges?
Mr. Mayor, there is standard wording for a noise covenant, but it certainly could be beefed up to be very precise to address the type of matters that you have raised, such as, the exact wording is not coming to my mind, but to make it clear that absolute or near absolute silence just is not to be expected because you are in the airport influence noise zone.
So I think if people, members of council, are agreeable at direction to staff that the wording be a little more precise and strict as opposed to the standard covenants. Agreed? Okay, so we've been asked to separate out 2A. So first we have Councillor Harder and Dean's motion. On the motion? Carried. Now we'll vote on everything but 2A, if that's agreeable to people, and we'll come back to 2A. So on the report as amended, minus 2A. Carried. Item 2A is dissent by Councillor Cloutier. On 2A?
And no, on everything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had asked that 2A be. Oh, that's you. Okay. So Councillor Cloutier is dissenting on the whole report, and Councillor Brockington is dissenting on 2A. All right. Thank you. All right. Our next item. Item number 17 on our agenda, policy for posting a 30-kilometer-hour speed limit on an existing roadway, politique concernant l'affiche d'une limite de vitesse de 30 km. Was that Councillor Nussbaum? Did you hold this one? Or Councillor Leeper? Oh, sorry, I apologize. Councillor Hubley held this item. Go ahead. What's that?
You would have got to me eventually coming down this way.
Working my way down.
So my question on the motion, Mr. Mayor, is more so the second part where it talks about applying this 30-kilometer zone to streets, collector streets in particular, with more than 2,500 cars on them. It says just in a school zone. Does the First Amendment mean the same thing, that it would only be in like a school zone that you would designate? Because some of these streets, like I have streets in my area that are quite long, and yes, there's a school on it, but I wouldn't want to designate the entire street 30 kilometers. So I just want to get clarification because it's broken out in two parts here. Does this only allow you to create a school zone of 30 instead of 40?
I think, I'm not sure if your issue deals with Councillor Hubely's, but I'll let Councillor Eglai, who has an amendment to the motion, read his amendment in the record, and then if it doesn't satisfy you, then you can, we'll get staff to comment. Councillor Eglai, please.
This motion is really a motion of clarification on a couple of pieces based on questions raised between when this went to committee and passed and today, raised by a number of members of committee and council. So I won't go through all the whereases, but I'll go through the be it resolves. The criteria 2 of the roadway and traffic environment criteria reading transit operations with roads with transit service a 30-kilometer speed limit will only be considered if the service is infrequent, 3 trips per hour per direction or fewer, or if the road already operates at 30 kilometers an hour more slowly during daytime hours, generally 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Saturday, be amended to read transit operations for roads with transit service at 30-kilometer speed limit will only be considered if the service is infrequent, 3 trips per hour per direction or fewer, if the road already operates at 30 kilometers an hour, or more slowly during daytime hours, generally between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Saturday, or if the road is a local or collector road at the main pedestrian entrance to a school. And be it further resolved that criteria 5 of the roadway and traffic environment criteria reading daily traffic volume, the Transportation Association of Canada's Geometric Design Guide identifies 2,500 vehicles per day as the upper threshold for local roadways, as the intent of the 30-kilometer per hour speed limit policy is to provide lower speed limits on roadways that serve the local roadway function. A 30-kilometer speed limit will only be considered on roadways with traffic volumes of less than 2,500 vehicles per day. Be amended to read, daily traffic volume, the Transportation Association of Canada's Geometric Design Guide identifies 2,500 vehicles per day as the upper thresholds for local roadways. As the intent of the 30-kilometer speed limit policy is to provide lower speed limits on roadways that serve the local roadway function, a 30-kilometer speed limit will only be considered on roadways with traffic volumes of less than 2,500 vehicles per day, or on roadways where traffic volumes are higher than 2,500 vehicles per day, and there's a school present whereby in these cases a school speed zone of 30 kilometers an hour could be implemented during the times when children are arriving to school in the morning or leaving school in the afternoon. So I don't know if that answers your concern. If it doesn't, we've got Phil Landry here who can talk to it in a more technical sense, but I think that may respond to what you've raised.
Well, the second part does, the second amendment part, because it talks about the school zone in the hours of business for the school. But the first amended piece talks about the collector road at the main pedestrian entrance to the school. So my question is it just the school zone that we're talking about or the whole road? And that first one isn't really clear to me on that.
So, Phil, can you answer Councillor Hubely's concern?
Mr. Mayor, it would be just in the school, and I'll ask Mr. Scrimger to maybe give some more details in terms of the operation of the buses.
Mr. Mayor, thanks. That section which gives 3 conditions under which 30 kilometers an hour zones would be permitted if there is transit service in front. Either if the transit service is infrequent.
Speak up a little bit.
I'm sorry. Either if the transit service is infrequent, or if the road already operates at a slow speed, or if the location is right in front of the main pedestrian entrance to the school. So that section is only about how the characteristics of transit service would affect the designation of the speed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. So we have Councillor Eglai's motion, seconded by Councillor Leeper. Carried. On the report as amended. Carried. All right. Motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Conseil Monette et Cadre, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Mayor, I move by myself, seconded by Councillor Cadre, that the Ottawa Board of Health, Report 9, Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee, Report 23, Community and Protective Service Committee, Report 22, Finance and Economic Development Committee, 22A and 23, Planning Committee, Report 41, Transportation Committee, Report 22, and the report from the City Clerk and Solicitor's Office entitled Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for Items, subject to Bill 73 explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of March 8, 2017, be received and adopted as amended.
On the report, or on the motion as presented by Councillor Monette, adopté. Motions of which notice have been previously given. Motion dont avis a été donné entièrement. Councillor McKenney, please. Seconded by Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't go through the whole motion. We do this every year, but this one will actually cover 2017 and 2018 so that I'm not back here asking for the same thing again next year. It's a road closure for Glow Fair, which is part of Bank Street BIA. It's an annual light art event. So therefore be it resolved that Council approve the road closure for Bank Street from Slater Street to Gladstone Avenue and Gloucester Street from O'Connor Street to Bank Street from 1 p.m. on the third Friday in June to 6 a.m. on the third Sunday in June for 2017 and 2018 for the Glow Fair Music Light Art event, providing it meets the requirements, conditions, and approval of the Special Events Advisory Team. Thank you.
Great, thank you. On the motion, carried. Motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Deroux, with respect to the Manatic Arena and renovations and the fire that took place there on suspension. Carried. Councillor Moffat, please.
Thank you. So I will read the motion just because it provides the necessary background to the matter. So whereas on May 15th, 2015, Council approved a list of priority projects for submission for funding consideration under the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program and directed the Treasurer to identify the matching source of city funding for any projects approved under the program. And whereas the City was successful in its application of a Canada 150 federal grant for the renovation and expansion of the Mantic Arena with a required completion date of March 2018, and whereas on December 9th, 2015, Council approved the allocation of Canada 150 and Strategic Initiative 37 funding for the Mantic Arena expansion project, with the balance to come from other city and community funding. And whereas the current project IO 907956 Mantic Arena has a budget authority of $2,796,932, and project financing to date is a combination of Strategic Initiative 37 funding, community partnership, major capital funding, Mantic community funding to the tune of $250,000 that they've brought forward to the table, and life cycle. And whereas the City received 11 competitive bids for the project, with the lowest responsive bid being $606,795 greater than the established project authority. And whereas the Mantic Arena suffered fire damage on the morning of January 27, 2017, after the project design drawings were complete and released for public tender, which is added to the expected scope of work and costs of the project for repairs and remediation. And whereas 81% of the total project scope of work allocated for new and expanded program space. And whereas the size and scale of the expansion qualifies as growth project under the Recreation Development Charges Rural Areas, therefore be it resolved that in consideration of the increased scope of work, increased costs, and fixed completion date for the Canada 150 grant, Council approved the capital authority for the Mantic Arena expansion be increased to $3,403,727 to be funded using recreation development charges allocated for the rural area. Now, we have three of these allocations across the rural area. We have west, south, and east. This would be taken from the south portion, which makes sense considering the south portion would be Rideau and Osgood, and this arena benefits both Rideau and Osgood, so it's a proper place for that funding, and that funding had not been previously allocated.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brockington on this issue.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting this motion, but I do have a question because it appears the fire has contributed to additional costs. What did the insurance cover for the damage, and why isn't that being covered off through insurance?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, because of the value of the damage is about $100,000, that is below the threshold of any insurance claim the city would have. Essentially, we are self-insured and have to come up with the funds to carry out the repairs.
Okay, thank you.
So the fire damage more than the building better.
It's terrible.
So on Councillor Moffat and DeRuza's motion, carried. Councillor Deans has a motion. We'd like to suspend the rules, seconded by Councillor Taylor, with respect to membership of the Property Standards and License Appeals Committee. On suspension of the rules, carried. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to read the motion. Whereas on December 8, 2010, City Council approved the establishment of a Property Standards and License Appeal Committee composed of 5 qualified citizen members to hear cases with respect to licensing and property standard appeals. And whereas the Council approved appointment policy for citizen members of City Advisory Committees, boards and task forces, and external boards, commissions, and authorities provides that the term of office for Council appointees can be 2 or 4 years. And whereas the appointment policy provides that members are eligible to serve a maximum of 2 consecutive terms on the same committee or board to a maximum of 8 years. And whereas on March 25, 2015, City Council approved the appointment of 5 members to the Property Standards and License Appeal Committee, 2 of which were approved for a 4-year term. The other 3 members were approved for a 2-year term. And whereas the 3 members appointed to 2-year terms are willing to continue on the committee until the next recruitment process, which will take place at the end of this term of council, and whereas extending the terms of these members to the end of this term of council would be in keeping with the 8-year term limit set out in the appointment policy, and whereas the terms of these members being extended would assist with any quorum issues and avoid the delays and expenses associated with undertaking a mid-term recruitment process, therefore be it resolved that council approved that the term of office of the following members of the License and Property Standards Appeals Committee be extended from 2 years to 4 years, and those members are Doug Wallace, Ewan Evans, and Stella Durham.
Councillor Leeper on the motion.
A quick question to staff, Mayor. I will be supporting this. Is there something that needs to be done in our governance review to ensure that we don't come across these again?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, actually this should have been included in the midterm governance about 4 or 5 months ago. It was an oversight by myself, so I apologize to members and we will remedy it at final governance.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have on the motion, carried. Does anyone else have a motion requiring suspension of the rules of procedure? Notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meetings. Avis de motion pour examen à réunion subséquente. Motion to introduce bylaws. Motion portant présentation de règlement. Conseiller Monette, s'il vous plaît, appuyé par conseiller Cadre.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Motion présentée.
It's supported by Councillor Caudry that the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws 3 readings be read and passed.
Just to remind members, at 12:30 today at the front entrance of City Hall on Elgin Street, and this is a message to all fans of the Ottawa Senators, so I know Councillor Moffat won't be going to the rally to support our home team, Councillor. It's at 12:30.
There'll be a small gathering to celebrate the success of the Senators at 12:30 at the entrance on Elgin.
Jerseys, you can wear them. And also I want to thank many members of Council for wearing pink today. This is the International Day of Pink, and I know some of you will probably be going to the event at the Horticulture Building this evening, and thank you for doing that. Do we have any written inquiries, Madam Deputy Clerk? No. Okay. Adjournment. Yes. Confirmation bylaw. Councillor Monette, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Présenté par moi-même, prié par...
That the proceedings of the City Council meeting of April 12, 2017 be adjourned. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Caudry, that the proceedings of the City Council meeting of April 12 be adjourned.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.